John Adams and the loneliness that nearly broke the presidency. He stood in the highest office, yet felt completely alone, surrounded by voices. He trusted almost none of them. Power had arrived, but companionship had quietly disappeared. To understand John Adams's presidency, we must move past the revolutions and declarations. We must look at the quieter strain of leadership when unity dissolves and isolation sets in. Because leadership today still carries the same hidden cost: the burden of making decisions without allies you can fully trust. Power, in its most demanding form, is not the ability to command others. It is a capacity to act clearly and deliberately when the people surrounding you stop serving as reliable counsel. When Adams took office in 1797, the nation was already divided. Political parties had hardened. Former friends had become rivals. Newspapers attacked relentlessly. And Adams inherited a government still finding its footing, with foreign powers watching closely for weakness. Unlike Washington, Adams lacked universal reverence. He was respected, but rarely loved. His temperament was sharp, his patience thin, and his honesty often worked against him. He did not inspire calm confidence. He demanded difficult truths. Washington had governed through the force of a reputation built in war and elevated to something close to myth. Adams had no such reservoir. Foreign pressure intensified the strain. France and Britain pushed America toward war. Each insult demanded response. Each response risked catastrophe. Inside his cabinet, loyalty fractured. Advisors often worked against him, aligned more with party than president. He presided over meetings that were, in practice, negotiations between factions rather than deliberations between trusted colleagues. Adams felt the isolation immediately. Meetings became battles. Decisions felt provisional. Even allies doubted his judgment. He began to question not just others, but himself. Whether firmness was courage or stubbornness, whether compromise was wisdom or surrender. The interior monologue of leadership, the constant evaluation of one's own instinct against the feedback of the environment, became, for Adams, an increasingly unreliable process. At first, Adams believed resolve would carry him through, that endurance could substitute for unity. But endurance without trust becomes exhaustion, and exhaustion clouds judgment. This was the beginning of Adams's quiet crisis, a presidency defined not by ambition, but by solitude, and the realization that governing without consensus can slowly erode the leader from within. The erosion is not dramatic. It does not arrive as a single failure or a visible break. The loneliness had only just begun. That loneliness deepened as the pressure intensified. Every path forward seemed to isolate him further. The conflict with France escalated into what became known as the Quasi-War. American ships were attacked. Diplomacy collapsed. Public anger surged. Many demanded war, believing force would restore national pride. Adams listened, but hesitated. War, he believed, would tear the fragile republic apart. Inside his own party, patience wore thin. Federalists expected aggression. They wanted unity through confrontation. Adams resisted, convinced that war would concentrate power dangerously and silence dissent. His caution was seen not as wisdom, but as weakness. Cabinet members undermined him openly. Information was withheld. Decisions were delayed. Adams realized he was leading a government that did not fully follow him. Trust, once fractured, proved nearly impossible to repair. Yet the greatest strain came from within. Adams questioned his instincts constantly. Each night brought doubt. Each morning demanded resolve he no longer felt certain he possessed. Leadership became an act of endurance rather than vision. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from overwork, but from the sustained effort of acting decisively in the absence of the confidence that decision deserves. To maintain order, Congress passed the Alien and Sedition Acts, laws meant to protect national security, laws that restricted speech and targeted immigrants. Adams signed them despite deep misgivings. He believed stability required control. The irony was cruel. In trying to preserve the republic, he sanctioned measures that threatened its core freedoms. He knew the contradiction, even as he accepted it. Public backlash was swift. Critics accused him of betraying the revolution. Supporters fell silent. Adams stood alone, carrying decisions few wanted to defend. He had placed himself, through a combination of circumstance and calculation, in a position where every remaining choice was between bad and worse, and where the historical verdict on his character would turn on which category observers place his decisions in. This was the early conflict of his presidency. Not foreign enemies, but isolation that narrowed perspective and magnified fear. The cost of leadership without trust had become painfully clear, and the hardest choices still lay ahead. The isolation reached its most dangerous stage when Adams chose peace, and nearly destroyed his presidency in the process. Despite public pressure, despite party fury, Adams reopened negotiations with France. It was a gamble few supported. War promised unity. Peace promised criticism. But Adams believed war would permanently damage the republic, even if it saved his political standing. He was making a calculation that very few political leaders ever make honestly, choosing the outcome that was genuinely better over the outcome that was personally advantageous, with full awareness that the choice would likely end his career. His decision split the Federalist Party beyond repair. Allies turned openly hostile. Newspapers attacked him as weak, vain, even un-American. Adams read every word. Each accusation cut deeper because he understood their power. Public trust, once lost, rarely returns. He was watching his political future dissolve in real time, and doing so deliberately because he had concluded that the alternative was worse for the country he had spent his life serving. The emotional conflict sharpened here. Adams knew he was likely ending his own presidency. He knew peace would not be celebrated, but he also knew history often judges restraint long after crowds forget anger. The choice was no longer political. It was moral, and moral choices in political life are the ones that tend to cost the most and pay back the slowest. Inside the White House, silence grew heavier. Adams withdrew. He wrote less. He spoke less. The loneliness that once strained him now hardened into resignation. Leadership became a solitary vigil against chaos. He had committed to a course he believed was right, and he was now simply waiting for the consequences to arrive. Unable to accelerate the vindication he believed was coming, unable to escape the punishment that was already here. When the peace treaty was finalized, war was avoided. Lives were saved, but the cost was immediate. Adams lost the election. His party fractured. His reputation suffered for decades. The outcome he had sacrificed his presidency to produce arrived without celebration. History would later recognize it. His contemporaries largely did not. This was the cruel paradox of his presidency. His greatest success ensured his personal failure. He preserved the republic by sacrificing his future within it. There is no cleaner example in American political history of the distinction between what is right and what is rewarded, and no clearer illustration of what it costs to choose the former when the latter is available. The conflict resolved, but the damage remained, and Adams left office convinced that doing the right thing often meant standing alone. Time softened what politics could not. History eventually reframed John Adams's presidency. The war he avoided never came. The republic endured, and the measures he regretted became warnings rather than templates. But the loneliness he experienced left its mark, not just on him, but on the office itself. He had demonstrated what the presidency could demand of a person, not just their time and energy and public identity, but their relationships, their certainty, and their sense of being understood. Adams taught an uncomfortable lesson. Leadership does not always reward integrity. Sometimes it punishes it. Decisions made in isolation can protect a nation while destroying a career. The presidency, he showed, could demand sacrifice without gratitude. And the person asked to make that sacrifice had to find within themselves, without external confirmation, without contemporary recognition, the conviction that it was worth making. His story matters because it exposes a truth often ignored. Power does not guarantee support. Authority does not ensure understanding. And doing what preserves the future can isolate you from the present. Today, leaders still face the same dilemma. Popularity versus principle. Unity versus caution. Immediate approval versus long-term stability. Adams chose stability and paid the price. The choice is not unique to his era. It recurs in every generation, in every institution. Wherever someone with genuine responsibility must decide how much of themselves they are willing to spend in the service of an outcome that may not be recognized in their lifetime. The presidency survived because he endured the loneliness that came with restraint, because he accepted obscurity over applause, and because he believed peace was worth personal loss. Not all heroes are celebrated in their time. Some are simply endured. Subscribe to stay updated. John